It's like 30 now, and it's 10 o'clock at night.
It's 50
Well,
degrees?
30, yeah, degrees Celsius.
Oh,
30, do you think?
Oh,
330, yeah.
oh God, I'm jealous. I mean, not the drought, but sunbathing.
except for that whole thing with no water.
Yeah, apart from that, it sounds great. Welcome to the Honest Designers Show, your transparent look into life as a modern designer. My name's Tom Ross, and I'm the founder at designcuts.com. And this week I'm joined by my fellow Brit and hand lettering expert, Ian Barnard, American retro design expert, Dustin Lee, and the ever-talented South African illustrator, Lisa Glantz. In this week's episode, we discuss design trends. It can often feel like design trends are changing constantly, making it pretty hard to keep up. After all, how do you keep your work feeling current and original, all while standing out against all the noise happening in your industry? This one's a good one, folks, so let's get into the show. So this week we're talking all about design trends and how quickly they change, and really how, as designers, this leaves us a little bit out in the cold, or certainly having to constantly react. That's how I've always felt with it. It's like you're almost constantly on the back foot, right? Because it's changing so quickly. So much of your energy goes into having to adapt, right? Just to keep up with what's like the new hot trend, or your work not looking really old and archaic or behind the times.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You guys must know this as well, right? I think every designer does.
I think we've seen it with trends with all of us, actually, because we've all done like typefaces in our shops, and you see those like trends on those just jump from one to another really quickly. And I think trends seem to be, it used to be there would be a trend and it would stay for a while, but now it seems to be trends like every month there's a new trend.
Yes, definitely.
I remember when like Helvetica New light and bold put together for a logo was around for like 10 years. It was
I'm guilty of that.
Or that feature bold condensed, is it? The one that appears in all the posters.
yeah.
That's a staple.
I know, and it seemed to be there was like, that lasted for quite a while, but now it's just, it feels like you're just sort of running to stand still. You're just like, you might release something, or you might use some stuff in a promotional stuff, and it's just like next month it's like, oh, it's moved on to this, and it's moved on to that, and yeah.
And part of me wants to say, well, yeah, it's great to pay attention to trends, but the foundations and the fundamentals of design, they never go out of style. So maybe ignore the trends. But I actually think you can't. And, I've had most of my previous career in web design. And so has Matt, our creative director here. And you have to, I don't even view it as a trend. I view it as literally the state of design at large, because a trend indicates something that's like a little blip, or, something that has no real weight behind it. But in web design, certainly, I think it's every 6 months, your website starts to feel outdated. And within a year, it feels terrible. The thing which you loved and felt super fresh, you're like, oh God, that feels really dated.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of designers who, because it's so hard to design your own website, they do leave it for years and years and years. And even the most solid designs, which are clearly still very well designed, they look obviously dated, like incredibly so. And it is really exhausting. So yeah, I really empathize with you guys, and we're certainly in the same boat on the product side, because it's not even 6 months. Like you say, it's a month in, and it seems to only be accelerating. I remember 4 years ago, it was more like 6 months for the product trends. Now it really is like every month or two, right?
Yeah, I think it's sort of tying in with like how quickly technology is moving on. Like with the amount of changes in like mobile phones, you expect now like a new phone from a manufacturer every 60 months to a year. Yeah, and to have something incredible on it every time, otherwise it's a failure. And it's the same with the design trends. Is unless you're producing something that's up with the trend, is it, you feel like, oh, I'm failing to sort of make it. And it's weird, you see a few of these bits around and then suddenly it's becoming a trend. You see like one or two people using it and then suddenly everyone's using it. And it's a weird thing how it suddenly just sort of, it's like a stream turning into a massive river.
Well, it's interesting. And as graphic designers, I think it's easy to forget that the field is essentially a resource for corporations to package their products. And in capitalistic societies, I know this sounds pretentious to use a word like that, so I apologize, but be talking like that. But the whole thing is to get people to consume, which, interesting enough, they call them consumers because like things get consumed like a fire. So things are changing so often because they want you to buy new stuff. And the only way to get you to buy new stuff is if things are constantly changing. So if you have Tide, right? Or if you have a new car, or whatever the thing is, you have to be putting new fonts and new colors and new designs and new layouts on it. Because if you keep it the same, people don't buy it again. So I think by the nature of being literally a resource for corporations, trends constantly change to make things look fresh, to force people to buy new things and have desires for things that they don't need. Boy, that's really negative, but I think that's the truth.
No, that's really insightful.
I mean, I went and saw, like, I was looking at laundry detergent the other day, and it was like one of those Nikki Lat style, like, brush script fonts when she first made it. I'm like, the trend is like starting to get down like the other side of the bell curve when Tide is starting to put brush script fonts onto their packages.
Mm-hmm.
It's so true.
Yeah, we are in many ways like the fashion industry, where we operate in this very small, or relatively small to the rest of the world, bubble, where things move very quickly, and then, like say, they trickle down. It's that long tail of the bell curve, and it trickles down to the wider world. But I think the pace accelerates quicker within our little bubble because we all influence each other on social media, marketplaces, all kinds of stuff. And so stuff spreads like wildfire within a month, for example. And it might take years for that to proliferate throughout commercial spending and brands and everything else. But we are in this like tiny, tiny little space in the scheme of things where it's just really concentrated.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're never going to get anything evolving so quickly as that little space.
Well, and we're like these little detectors in like almost living in the future, Like you have you noticed that? Like you'll see design things pop up and they look cool to us, but then like they're nowhere out in the wild. And then 6 months, a year later, it's everywhere, and you realize, oh, I thought this was cool a year ago, not because I'm hip and on top of stuff, but just because when you live in this community of designers, you're the first people to see that because that's where it came from. And it slowly gets printed out into products and then books. And
how many popular blog posts have you seen where people are like, here's my projections for the design trends in 2018? Designers do tend to get a kick out of being Nostradamus with this stuff.
Yeah. Well, the crazy part is they're actually trying to look out even further into the future. Because if they like just directed it towards regular businesses and told them what was going to be popular, they could just say what's popular now, and then they would seem like they know the future.
That'd be good.
Yeah. We should do that actually with non-designers we know. Be like, pay attention to your supermarket aisle, because I promise you in 9 months, it's going to be all brush scripts.
Yeah. And then take a picture with your phone. This will be everywhere.
They literally wouldn't care. They'd be like, you loser. But to go back to what you're saying, Dustin, with the commercial side of it, that isn't actually just big corporations. That is everything. I remember even when I used to run my Photoshop blog, every time I redesigned, I would see a big spike in engagement. Mm-hmm. So I think it's everything. Small businesses, big businesses, brands, websites, blogs, you name it. Every time you redesign, unless you really kind of do a bad redesign, right, it always tends to kind of jump it forward in the front of people's mind and get them more engaged.
Yeah, but I do think there are, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I think there are kind of like base trends that are quite consistent, and then within them they have this like little world evolving in themselves, but essentially the base trend lasts longer. Well, I think. I mean, if I just look at watercolors, for example, that's still going. I mean, that's been going for 2 years. It's still popular. People still want that kind of product. They're still using it in graphic design everywhere, on stationery, invitations. But the style of the watercolor is changing. So even though watercolors are still popular, there's all these nuances within that style, and I think it is tricky to kind of stay on top of things, and it's really easy to get overwhelmed. I mean, I freak out every time. I'm like, oh my goodness, now they're doing this, and that's not my style because I'm not good at that, and I should be doing this. And
I want to see if you agree, Lisa. Have you noticed within the watercolor trend there's getting a kind of like dark, dreamy, macabre kind of look, which is not you at all. You're more like the kind of cute style, like bright
and
style.
I think, because that's what I was going to say, I'm glad you brought that up, because I was actually going to use that as an example, because I think, personally, my thing is that I think it's silly to try and shove yourself into a trend that really isn't your style. So, I mean, the base is there, so watercolor is still out there. So definitely still pursues, if I look at the base trend, so pursue the base trend, but don't try and like, mix yourself into this like thing that doesn't belong, and then it ends up being a stuff up because you try to do something that isn't you. And so yes, it's a good thing to keep up with it, but at the same time, don't sacrifice your design integrity and your personality in your work to maintain.
So don't chase trends, I guess you're saying, if they're incongruous.
Yes, I think you can definitely, as I said, like chase the base trends, because I think they're there much longer. Like, for example, brush script, even though the whole style of lettering is changing every week, as you said, Ian, it's still script fonts that are pumping, so you can still follow that trend, but then don't try and do something that's not your style.
I think it's like you're thinking about it as a fashion, and you try and you're like a guy, and you go, okay, skinny jeans are in, I'm going to get some of them, and you wear them, and you just like, people give you some funny looks, and like my wife, if I was wearing them, would.
Is this a true story, Ian?
Yeah, I was going to say.
I did get a pair of slim fit jeans.
Oh, can you stand up and give us a 12 for the video watchers?
Luckily, I haven't got them anymore. But they were like, and you wear them. Your wife sort of, you go, oh, what do you think? And she sort of looks and like doesn't respond straight away, and you always know that's like, okay, so it's wrong. But it's that. Sometimes, like Lisa was saying, you try and shoehorn into your stuff into that trend that's not really you and not what you're about. I think it's very much a case of sort of picking and choosing ones that work within your, whether that's skill set, with your style, with your what your work's about. Otherwise, it just doesn't look right, and it just doesn't fit right, and then it just looks a bit awkward. So it's, there could be loads of these, and I think there's like a hierarchy of trends. There's the trends that are really out there, and there's some people who can master that, and they can get away with those ones, or not get away with it, but they can use it and manipulate it into their thing. And then there's more safe trends. So I suppose the brush script is more of a safe trend. And so it's really picking and choosing, really examining it and see if it can work for you, really, rather than just trying, oh, that's trendy, let's use that. Because it just, you can see through it, and it's like, oh, it's just not,
I think there's a lot of trends that are perhaps more adaptable than that. So, for example, Lisa, you wouldn't go and do something completely opposite to watercolor. That would make no sense. But for example, we're actually redesigning Design Cuts as a website and community right now. And I think, as an aside, a cool element of trends is you get to do amazing new design work. It's actually kind of exciting when you reimagine things. and make it feel up to date. That's a big thing we actually love as designers. So we can kind of moan about the stresses of keeping up with it, but it can be kind of fun. But for example, with that redesign, it's just shifting things. So often it's not a complete 180 on what you're doing. It's like a iterative evolutionary approach where, say it is every 6 months, you're just creeping it forward. And so when you look back in 5 years, that's why the thing 5 years ago feels completely different. It's because it's just been moving the needle with each shift in the trend. And so certainly within web design, we're noticing stuff like people are shifting away from flat design and more solid iconography, and it's going more towards outlined like line icons and stuff like that, and going a little bit more high key, big brand almost with some of the colorization, and losing that more childlike amateurish color palettes. And that's kind of the direction we're taking our site, but we're seeing that at scale. And so things like that, it's not like we're going for a completely different look. It's just we're like pushing it a little bit more elegantly. And now I can't stop flipping between the new one and the current one. And when I do that, I look at the current one and go, God, that feels really like childish by comparison, even though it's just a little shift in a certain direction.
Well, it seems like it's like this pendulum going back and forth. I think about like music, and you think, someone like in the 90s, Nirvana comes out and does this like kind of really rough around the edges music. And then next thing you know, you have something like Weezer, who is doing this much more poppy version of it. And then that keeps progressing until you have things that are just like an abomination, like Creed, doing like this like super just generic, horrible music. And then all of a sudden, like people are like, whoa, no.
I guess you don't like Creed? Sorry.
Where's that on the scale of with Nickelback?
Yeah, like I was going to say, like Nickelback would have been a better example. Like then it gets to Nickelback and then people get really upset. And I'm like, the pendulum starts swinging backwards to like, my timelines are a little off here, but like maybe like the Arctic Monkeys or something like that. I don't know, So I think that happens like with design too. Like people might do these really loose brush scripts and then people are like, oh, too loose. Oh, everyone's doing that. Then all of a sudden the brush scripts get more refined, right? I don't know if that's happening. I actually don't pay attention to this stuff. But that's the advantage of retro supply, is that I only have to do stuff after it's done. I'll be doing brush scripts in like 15 years.
Good thinking. Oh my goodness.
That's genius, actually.
It'd be like with a vintage brush script pack.
Yeah. Which there are vintage brush scripts and they're good.
Mm-hmm. I think within music, Dustin, rap is actually a great example, because that has evolved so much, but it's been that very much like slow evolution. It hasn't completely gone from like 70s and 80s rap to where it's at now.
Yeah.
It's like, and a lot of the stuff that was shocking at the time now isn't at all. It's like almost quaint looking back, and the needle just keeps moving.
Like,
but it doesn't go from 1978 to 2018 like that. It never happens stylistically. And I think, as we're kind of saying here, the same thing's true of design, right? It's very rare that suddenly a trend comes along and turns everything completely on its head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Although
that's true.
I do remember some disruptive trends though, to go back on what I just said, like flat design.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure maybe if I was paying closer attention, that crept in. But at the time, I just felt like I blinked and suddenly it was everywhere. And if you weren't doing flat design, you looked really dated and really unfashionable. And it literally was like suddenly everywhere I looked.
And we still see, and I think that's the interesting thing, kind of like what you and Lisa are saying, is you see the strand almost of the DNA of the trend continue on, and it just sort of evolves and changes to suit, the political climate or people's desire to see something new or whatever happens,
Yeah.
But yeah, like the DNA, like I still see flat design stuff places, it's maybe not quite as flat, but you see it.
Yes.
And you're like, there it is. Yeah. I still like that.
Yeah.
Or sometimes I'll see like that shadow trend and I'll be like, there that is. Why is that still there?
Yeah, the long 45-degree shadow trend.
Yeah. I think when you first see a trend, you're like, not sure, it's unfamiliar. I'm not sure if I like this. It's like when a big company rebrands, you're like, am I sure about this? Everyone's a bit mixed, and then it sort of grows on you.
Like the Google logo.
Like the Google logo, or anything like that. And then it becomes, it filters down, and you get a bit more comfortable with it. And then everyone starts using it, then they overuse it, and then you can't wait to see the back of it. So, and that's the sort of normal trend, isn't it? As soon as it gets down to the point where everyone's using it and overusing it, that's when that's when a new trend breaks in to break up that.
Here's a question: would you get sick and tired of it if it wasn't overused, just through the erosion of time? Diminishing your enjoyment. So, you know what I'm saying? So, if like it never became crazy popular, would it just kind of peter out because it had been around too long?
I think it depends on the actual quality of the trend. Do you know what I mean by that? So
yeah, completely. Some feel like a novelty, and others feel like they have weight behind them.
Exactly. I mean, if you look at Helvetica, I mean, that was a trend that lasted, and people overused that. So but that was a quality trend, I guess.
But I think you can still use that there, though. I know it got overused, but
you can definitely still use it.
Yeah, you can still do so.
Yeah.
Recently available at designcats.com.
And it's a hell of a deal.
I like it.
Heck of a deal.
I think the thing about something being trendy means it's popular, because it's because you have a trending thing on like YouTube where so I think it's hard things unless it is trending, you won't see enough for that it's popular enough and that you'll get sick of it. Really, I think the fact that something starts trending, like fidget spinners trending for ages, and then people are like, really want one, not anymore.
Yeah, and it's such a paradox, because on the one hand, trends are there because, as you said, and that people are enjoying them and wanting them, and they're popular. But I think when you come in, like either at the middle or the kind of end of a trend, and you're using it flat out, say in a website design, I think that's dangerous, because then you kind of hedging your whole success of the look of the website on a trend that's probably going to peter out in, I don't know, like a year or whatever. So it's almost like you need to take aspects of the trend that you enjoy and you think has longevity and has, as I said with Helvetica, it needs to have a quality about it, and leave the gimmicky stuff out. So you can still, I don't know, it's difficult, because you basically have to break down the trend and analyze, and what is it about it that you think is good, and kind of use that as your basis. It's tricky.
Again, it's kind of like music, where you have the real winners are the music companies, or in this case, maybe the larger agencies, or in this case, people like Design Cuts are the real winners, because, not to say they're winners and the others are losers, but they have a game played in their favor. It's just the truth, because check it out. I'll use Tom because Tom's here.
Go on, where are you going with this, buddy?
This is where I'm going with this. So Tom,
we're the evil overlords.
Tom owns a business where as different trends come up, it doesn't matter. He can just pick whatever is doing well and immediately start to base his business around that. Just like a record company, as one certain thing comes up, they can say, well, now we're going to sell that kind of record. And when that's done, we'll sell this kind of record. Maybe it's, ska, and it's like rap, whatever it is, right? So the people that are able to do that are the people that have the game stacked more in their favor. The people that are independent artists and stick to one thing are going to have their day in the sun, but that sun is more likely to set sooner. And that's not a bad thing or a dig. I think it's just the reality of how business works.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we're all beholden to the market and demand, right? So if the demand for retro stuff went to zero, you would pivot. You would have to do something else.
And I couldn't call it retro supply. I'd have to completely just make something brand new.
Exactly.
Change your brand.
So we're kind of all in that boat of just being completely at the mercy of the market.
True, but I feel like someone like Atlantic
I know
Records.
what you're saying.
Atlantic Records isn't like, oh no, like this doesn't work anymore. They just say, stop signing that kind of band, sign a different band.
Yeah,
You know what I
it's
mean?
the band which is in a tougher spot.
Yeah, like they
I
don't
get
say
what you
shut down Atlantic and make something else.
Yeah,
Or maybe
but
they do.
bands,
I don't know.
using that example, have to evolve their sound quite often for that same reason.
Right. But
That's
but
true.
most of them don't. Most of them end up like in the garbage heap of pop culture,
Yeah,
which
very
is
true.
where I'm heading. Which is where we're all heading in the long run.
You could just redo your shop to trend supply, and you just supply all the latest trends, and they will never not
Yeah, you
be
never have a
in
problem.
trend.
have no integrity, just chase every latest trend.
I'm gonna do that. I should do that. If I had all the resources, I would. I'd be like, look, we're just gonna shoot straight with you. Whatever's trendy, we're selling.
Yeah, you should have a parody site of stuff that's just like.
Please do. And all your marketing could be like, buy now, because in 2 weeks it's going to be out of fashion.
Yeah.
So that's actually a good point to bring up. What do you guys? What's your opinion on designers that do that? Because there are designers that do that, literally.
Burn them.
Like,
Burn them. That's my opinion.
I mean, they literally follow every trend without injecting their own take on it or personality, or it's literally like they see something and they copy it.
I mean, that's what bigger agencies do.
That's what agencies. Sorry, I missed that.
Like bigger agencies that do stuff for big clients do.
Yeah, well, you see, I'm not. I don't know if that's. I mean, what do you guys think? To me,
if you want to
I don't
make
know
money,
if
you have to,
it's-
right? Like,
You don't necessarily have to.
Yeah.
I think it works, clearly, especially as you mentioned,
does.
big agencies are doing it. But if I had the choice, which I do, I would always choose to be the solo designer who had integrity and had his own style, or the agency that was known for their own style, because I think it makes you more magnetic to clients. So I think people are more likely to go to you because they want your style of work, as opposed to you having to go to them by chasing what they're after.
I actually think from a business point of view, our way, the way you just discussed now, is the smarter way, and it has more sustainability, because the other way is chasing trends. So you kind of like you relying on the trend to
it's more stressful
get your business, essentially. Whereas the other one, if you're showing more of your personality, that's what's getting your business. So yeah.
I concur, Glands. I concur.
The thing is, out of all our businesses, I suppose mine is the one that's probably more following a trend, because mine's like, at the moment, it seems to be the case that like working on Procreate brushes is the thing to do.
mm-hmm.
But how long has that got the life in it? When will another app come along that beats it? Will people start using a different bit of technology because it's only the iPad that it's on? It might be the case that someone else comes along and just blows Apple out the water.
But you've got foundation in lettering, which is the
it makes sense that you do that.
Yeah,
it fits in with what you do. It's not like you decided to. I don't know.
Although, speaking of trends, lettering, I think you've shown this to us, Ian. If you go on Google Trends, it has been rising for years and years and years in popularity. And now I feel like it can't go forever. I feel like it's the Bitcoin of design trends, where if I started lettering now, next week it would be incredibly unpopular or something. You know what I mean? It's like, at what point does it peter out?
I don't think it will become unpopular, because I think there's always a space for lettering itself. I think it really helps if you can put in the work to make it look awesome. So it's like, you have to put in a lot of work to make it look awesome, which anyone has to do anyway. But then you really need to find your style, and stand out, a style that's not like anyone else's.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
A bit like with illustration, you have to really have something that just, some little quirk, something that's you in your work. And that's the same with lettering, because there are hundreds of people doing it, and you can look through and it might a sea of stuff that looks very similar, but you need to have that quirk about you, about your work, and quality, the combination of sort of quirk and quality, that then companies will see it and they go, okay, yeah, really want you to do something for us in that style. And I think that's how people really get a name for themselves. But they also, on that point, they have to keep evolving their style.
Yeah,
I think there's no question that lettering is super trendy. I mean, I think the moment I was like, this is getting super trendy is when there started to be books out that were for people that weren't designers to do lettering in that kind of popular style that we see.
Yeah.
And it was just everything. It was like, wow, now this is just for anybody to do. Like everyone is doing lettering. But at first, when you were saying that, I was like, no, it's a trend, buddy. And then I was like, no, I'm wrong about that. Like it is a trend, but it's just kind of like, it's like, for instance, sign painting. Like sign painting is still a thing. Like it's still a great thing and people need it. And it, you know what I mean? Like there'll always be room for an Ian Bernard to do lettering, and there'll always be plenty of people for him to never, ever run out of clients and people that love what he's doing. I just feel like right now it's overrepresented in general.
So there probably won't be room for Connor down the road who sucks at it, and he's currently way down in the long tail of lettering, where because of its booming popularity, much like when the economy has like a bull market or something, he's able to scrape by and make a living now on his subpar skills because of the demand. If that went away, the Ians of the world would be fine, but the Connors perhaps wouldn't.
Right, exactly. Like you got those rocks in there that will always be there. Yeah.
I think there's also a thing where you get a trend inside a trend. So you
like Inception.
Yeah, a bit like that.
A Russian doll of trends.
That would be a trend inside a trend inside a trend.
Trendception.
But what I'm trying to say is that you have lettering has always been around. There's always been hand letterers.
Yes, there has.
So there's that. That could be say as a trend, but then inside that you get this trend of lettering that has a certain style that seems to be at the forefront of that craft. And like sign painting has always been around. There was a point when vinyl lettering came out, which then knocks sign painting, and that was a trend for a while. And then people realised actually that the vinyl lettering that looks exactly the same, on next door shop as it does on this shop as it does on that shop, really has no personality. And then sign painting has made over the past sort of 10, 15 years, made a real resurgence, and people want the fact that it's handmade and it's got personality in it. And so I think it's a weird thing where there's certain things that won't go away. Like flat design is not I suppose something that will be around forever. It was just a trend inside this sort of illustration, web design stuff. So I think you get these little pockets of trends that pop up and then go away, but you have an overall trend of whatever that may be.
Yeah.
I agree.
100% agree. Lisa, I was just going to say, Lisa, you mentioned earlier about not following a trend that's incongruous with your style. And I think that's so true, but I think also think about the style of the project. So if a cafe was like, oh, we're a real quirky kind of homely farmyard style feel at our cafe, and then you're like, okay, well, flat design's hot right now, so I'm gonna slap on some super clean illustrations, it wouldn't work. It would want something more handmade and hand drawn and homely. And so I think quite often you have to disregard the trend, because we're designers, right? We care about this stuff more than anyone else, and probably more than we should at points. And I've certainly been guilty of applying a trend to every project I have coming in, no matter what it's like. And more times than not, that's been the wrong decision, because it hasn't actually been suitable. And I should have invested the time learning about the client and their company and their whole brand image and all the stuff we've talked about on past episodes, learning what mood they want to evoke and what words they want to evoke and that kind of stuff. That's actually much more powerful than trends. And then the trend is almost like a tool to use to make it look particularly fashionable or whatever. So you're like, oh, okay, so I know there's 3 key trends in the design industry. I'm going to handpick that one and apply it to all the context which I've already gathered about this project, just to kind of put it on steroids almost. But when you start with the trend in place of that fundamental research, I think that's where it's damaging.
Yeah, I think you're doing a client a disservice, and you could apply a trend literally by just using a font that's popular. It doesn't have to be a whole look. I mean, at one stage it was the whole hipster thing, and I mean, every single shop on earth, that was their brand look. And
what, like the moustache icon?
Yeah, and it's just, I think you're doing the client a disservice because you're just making them look like everybody else instead of actually bringing out the personality of the business. And then you could still bring in the hipster angle, but it doesn't have to be full on.
I live near Portland though, and that's still popping, man.
Yeah, I bet it is. I've never been there, but anyone I know from there is like, yeah, we're hipster state USA.
Yeah,
mustaches are definitely still a thing. Yeah,
and top knots.
I was thinking about how certain trends work for certain industries and for certain companies. So, like if you took, for instance, Harrods, which is the famous department store in London, they wouldn't suddenly decide to do some like graffiti style promotion because it just doesn't suit. That might be the trend, but it doesn't suit their luxury brand.
No.
But you get a company called Nike, like Nike, who
you mean Nike?
Nike.
Strucken.
Oh no, he didn't.
Sorry.
Where their part of their brand is actually finding people who do the really different stuff, like designers who start trends, and they use that in their promotion. So it'll be something really like left field in terms of design, but you then see other companies similar start using it about a year later. But part of their
but that's in their brand. That's their brand language, so it makes perfect sense.
Yeah,
to do that.
So it's working out because it's just that it's just working out. Like, if you're someone who is like a businessman, you don't then wear jeans and a t-shirt when people expect you to wear a suit because it just doesn't. It gets it's that all going back to that awkwardness. And I think you have to really, the research is the big thing. Is looking at it, looking at the audience, looking at where it fits in terms of the marketplace, and just all the things that surround it, rather than just saying, "There's a good trend, let's use that," because it doesn't look, it doesn't. There's a disconnect if you haven't really thought about it. And sometimes you have to say, actually, that hipster look is not going to work with this.
And you have to push back, right? Because I've had clients say, "I want that hot new trend." And I've had to explain why it doesn't work for them.
So have you ever got the mood board? They send a mood board and you're like, no.
Is that man from Shoreditch that I see? Yeah.
It seems the people that really tend to be able to walk, because I feel like we're talking about having to walk a really fine line. And it seems the people that are best at it are the people that are so rooted and know so much about who they are that when they start to do something that has to do with that trend, it just kind of naturally integrates with them, but you still see them underneath. I was thinking of the Forefathers group. They do some amazing design work, and it will kind of float with the trend a little bit, but they just have such a strong personality, it feels like them. Or you can put it with like certain consumer products like Coke. Coca-Cola does all sorts of different stuff that like fits on trends, but they're just such a rock solid brand. It's a cliche to say that they can try these things and it still feels like it. You don't get a sense that anything's been compromised because they did it. And I think when you know who you are really deep inside, I think you can express those other parts of things without it seeming like a sellout or a whatever.
Well, you're kind of dabbling and having fun. And I think that can be effective for designers as well as big brands. So I think the stronger the brand or the company image, the less threatened or affected they are by trends. So you look at Coke, for example, their logo type has pretty much not changed over the years, like hardly at all. And yet their external marketing will probably change quite a lot around that, but it's kind of orbiting the strong central brand. Whereas I would say inherently Pepsi is a weaker brand compared to Coke, and they've actually evolved their logo quite considerably more over the years, probably following some trends within that. So if you do the same as a designer, where you've got the rock solid core, but you're just dabbling and almost having fun with it. You're like, oh, there's a trend. I'm going to try that out. Oh, that's kind of cool. Or like, oh, I tried that one. Didn't really like it. That's fine as long as that's happening in the periphery to what you have going on at the core of your business.
Well, it's so interesting. Like this is extending off of that. It's so interesting. You think about these people that have been really successful and tended to have longevity. And you think of, Aaron Draplin has had that. Saul Bass, for instance. Saul Bass could be making stuff today, and like it's retro, you could say, or whatever, but it would still be just as cool today to have Saul Bass making the intro to your movies as it was back when he was doing it, So, and in the same way, Draplin in like 15 or 20 years is still going to be something where you're just like, I always love when I see that. It just gives me a good feeling. Yeah, it has some of that, but more than that, it feels like him or her.
But how many people can aspire to get to that level? What about us mere mortals?
Well, I think that goes back to like the thing of like forums. Like we look at them, and it's better to be able to look at that and strive and keep that as a good example of how to find your direction than to just blindly try things. Like maybe we can't all do that, but maybe we should all keep those things in mind as we're on our journey. Kind of be as like little North Stars or something. Sounds so cheesy, but
I think that's where like side projects are really important. A bit like your and Lisa's daily drawings is that.
Oh, can you give her a proper plug here? Because we literally, we're so biased. We plug Dustin's daily Instagram so much on the show, and I keep forgetting to mention Lisa's, but it's so awesome.
Oh, you don't have to do that.
Yeah, we do. Ian, sorry to interrupt. Please take it away, though. Do you remember the handle?
The handle is I can't remember the handle.
It's
5 minutes.
5-minute drawing.
5 and the number 5, not the word 5. So it's 5-minute drawing on Instagram.
Drawing. Yeah.
Everyone should check it out. I mean, the clue's kind of in the title, but Lisa does her amazing.
What she can do in 5 minutes is truly amazing.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. It's actually, I think there's a 0 missing. It should be 50-minute drawing, but I think she couldn't. That one was taken.
Yeah.
So it's 5-minute drawing.
She's cheating. It's actually 5 days.
Some of them are horrendous, so they're not that great. But yeah.
Anyway, they are really great. So don't listen to her. But yeah, please go follow. They're really awesome, and I need to be commenting more, but I keep catching them between meetings and stuff. But they are amazing. So yeah, keep it up. Super inspiring.
Thank you.
5-minute drawing, y'all.
I think side projects is a great way for, if you're still finding your style and finding your look, having a side project to experiment by trying trends that you see and then doing it, posting it. And I think you continue through that, and that's where you work out what your style is going to be. Like Dustin's already started to manifest into a certain style through his. And you can see that. And I think sometimes it helps doing it that rather than experimenting on a client project, which can sometimes, may work well, but sometimes might just not work well and really not last well. And so it won't last well in your portfolio as well when you're trying to show people this is what I do. People can see, oh, he's just sort of jumped on that trend rather than, because I'm thinking of like a person like, we mentioned Aaron Draplin, but also like John Contino has a vintage lettering style, which works for companies like Nike, for, big companies that use that but in a modern way. And I think having that really helps, because then people just recognize your work and it has a timeless quality to it, which is it's hard to get. But I think if you pursue the experimentation of doing, sharing, tweaking, trying new stuff out, and just seeing what you feel comfortable with, and I think you'll eventually get to your own style, I think.
Nice. Would you say the key is finding a client who, like Nike, who is constantly changing the style of their marketing because it's always going to give you work? unlike a company that just sits there and looks the same for 50 years. So when they're putting something out and changing the look every week, it's like, yeah, got another project for you.
Wait, for people, really quick, for people in the United States, I'm confused now. I was joking earlier, but Ian, when you say Nike, do you mean Nike?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same company.
But I say Nike, so...
It's Nike with us, for us.
Is it really?
Well.
It's
Yeah.
both.
Yeah.
It's both here in the UK.
Whoa.
Do you say Adidas or Adidas?
Adidas. You don't say Adidas. You're joking.
I say
Adidas.
Adidas.
No, you don't. Shut up.
I do.
No, you
There's
don't.
We've established this. We speak correctly, Dustin. We've been through this.
You guys, we in the United States invented these brands. We invented Nike. You call it Nike. Like, you don't get to decide. It's
How do you
called
say
Nike,
Porsche?
you guys.
Do you say Porsche or Porsche?
Well, if you're like kind of like, I think if you're like a little bit more uppity, you might say Porsche, and then people kind of give you a look like judgmentally, like, you think you're better than me? So most people call it Porsche.
Dustin's angry side coming out. On a final note, and completely unrelated to this episode, but I did want to do a shout out for the listeners. We are actually going to be putting together a video highlighting as many of the daily challenges that have come from the show as we can, and trying to tell people stories there, because I've seen a whole bunch of them. I've seen at least like 6 or 7, well, more than that, I think, really, really good ones that have literally stemmed from the show, with people saying, Honest Designers Show started me doing this artwork or this drawing or this illustration, this lettering every day. There's a whole bunch of them, and I love seeing them. So if you are doing one and you've told us, just tag us up again, letting us know if you want to be part of that video. If you're doing one and you've never tagged us and you've kind of kept it private, do share it with us. And if you haven't started one, now's the time. But we are going to put together a few of these videos and just really kind of use it as a platform to shout out to these people, because it's super inspiring.
It is.
I know we did a whole episode on Meg and how amazing she's got at illustration, and she'll definitely be in the video. But as I say, there's a bunch of people doing it, so it should be a cool video.
It's so neat, and I've noticed a lot of people tagging that they've done it, and I think the coolest ones are people just doing things they really feel uncomfortable doing. And you literally see them like getting better, like within like a week or two, like you start to see real improvements. It's really neat.
It's one of my favorite things that's come from the show. That I forget who, but actually in her bio section for her Instagram, it said this profile came from the Honest Designers Show.
Wow.
And I was like, wow, that's crazy.
That is unbelievable.
But anything like that, we do love it. I was also on, there's a designer called Rebecca who I follow back, and I did that thing where you start playing your Instagram stories and it like automatically keeps playing through until you stop. And it was about 9 stories in, and suddenly my own face popped up. And I think she was sat with her son watching the Honest Designers on this big screen in front of her. And we're obviously now doing the video version. I'm like, oh, that's kind of crazy. But yeah, I would say if you're into the video side of things, do go check us out, youtube.com/design cuts. You can get all the latest episodes on there in video with our little faces chatting away. Instead of just the audio experience. And there's normally a blooper or some kind of weird outtake at the start, normally with Dustin wearing like a weird mask or something.
Head.
A giant chicken head. A little bonus for you. But yeah, I don't know. I kind of wanted to conclude this episode with a bit of a shout out for the listeners, because we wouldn't be able to do this without you guys. We appreciate you so much. And yeah, you continue to inspire and motivate us. So thank you to everyone tuning in.
Thank you very much.
Cool.
I agree.
Well, I guess that's bye from me, bye from all of us, and we'll see you next time.
See you guys.
Bye.
See ya.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode. We hope that it gave you some fresh perspective on design trends, as well as some actionable tips for how to keep your work feeling current and stylish. As always, you can find full show notes over at honestdesigners.com, or find us over on iTunes by searching for The Honest Designers Show. If today's episode helped you, then it would mean the world to us if you took just a moment to leave us a quick review over on iTunes, as this is one of the best ways for your fellow designers to discover the show. Thanks again for tuning in, and we will see you next week right here on The Honest Designers Show.